Kia ora koutou katoa. Hello, thank you and welcome Thank you so much for making the time to come to this webinar tonight. Tonight we're going to mainly talk about the online graduate diplomas in teaching. Before we get started, I'm just going to go through a little bit of housekeeping. So we do have a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen there. If you do have any questions that you want to ask throughout the presentation, feel free to just pop them in the Q&A box there and we'll address them at the end. So my name is Sophie Scott-Elvidge and I am an academic student advisor postgraduate in the Student Centre at Education and Social Work. With me tonight is Tamar Weiss-Coves, who is the Program Leader for the Graduate Diploma in Teaching Early Childhood, Dr. Esther Fitzpatrick, who is the Program Leader for the Graduate Diploma in Teaching Primary, and Dr. Barbara Ormond, the Program Leader for Graduate Diploma in Teaching Secondary. We're also lucky enough to have Tom Clark, who is a current student on the Graduate Diploma of Teaching Secondary. Just a little bit about the University of Auckland before we get started. So we are the #1 university in New Zealand. We are also the #1 university for education as a subject in New Zealand. We've got really strong connections with the community and schools in Auckland and Northland, and we've got a 97% employment rate for faculty graduates, which is very high. So let's get straight into it. What is a graduate diploma in teaching? It's a pathway into teaching for those who already hold a bachelor's degree. There are 3 different graduate diplomas. There's the Graduate Diploma in Teaching Early Childhood, the Graduate Diploma in Teaching Primary, and the Graduate Diploma in Teaching Secondary. Just a few quick facts about the program. It's a 1-year intense program to become qualified as either an early childhood, primary, or secondary teacher. It's a highly practical program, so there's up to 19 weeks of practicum placement in a variety of school settings. The practicums are interspersed with coursework, which means that you get to get some really hands-on experience and then take that back to academic learning and apply your academic learning to real-world experience. It's also taught by leading experts in their subjects and in their fields. We've got a couple of different study options for the graduate diplomas. So for all 3 of the graduate diplomas, you can either study them online or face-to-face at the Epsom campus. I'll just point out here that they do have an early start date. The Graduate Diploma in Teaching Early Childhood and Primary both start on the 17th of January, and secondary starts on the 1st of February. So it is just a little bit earlier than the normal programs. For the online graduate diplomas in teaching, they are, again, 1-year full-time programs. They are all approved by the Aotearoa New Zealand Teaching Council. You'll have online access to program material, just as you would if you were studying face-to-face. And in 2022, the online graduate diploma in teaching secondary, you can take for the following subjects. So that's science, biology, chemistry, physics, social studies, history, maths, English, and te reo Māori. For practicum placement requirements, you are going to need to be within the Northland or Auckland regional boundary for your practicum placements. So if you do live outside of Auckland, but you're able to come to Auckland or Northland for your practicum placements, that could be a viable option as well. So definitely do look into that. So now I'm going to hand over to Tamar Weiss-Coves, who's going to talk a little bit about the Graduate Diploma in Teaching Early Childhood.
Thank you, Sophie. Kia ora koutou katoa. So my name is Tamar Weiss-Coves. I'm pleased to welcome you to the Graduate Diploma in Teaching Early Childhood Education. So this is for people who are keen to teach young children before they start school. So in New Zealand, most children start school at 5 years old. Some start at 6 years old. So this is for teachers who are keen to work in early childhood centres and kindergartens. As Sophie said before, the program starts on the 17th of January next year, and our program includes 17 weeks of practicum experience across 3 different types of early childhood services. That is something that we organise for students, and you are supervised by a professional supervisor as well as being allocated an associate teacher. So you go into that practicum experience with a lot of support Sophie, could you turn this next slide, please? Thank you. So early childhood teaching is a really exciting field to work in, and it's the opportunity to have a positive influence on young children and their families during a time which is formative for children. We know in terms of how children's brains work that you know, a significant amount of development happens before they even get to school. So it's a really exciting field to work in. Professionally, it's very satisfying. And early childhood teachers are in high demand at the moment. There is a shortage of qualified early childhood teachers out there. So to become qualified really will give you a good foot in the door into working in the sector. The program is taught mostly by experienced early childhood teachers with subject expertise. And the courses that you would study include the arts, STEM, curriculum and pedagogy, literacies, languages and cultures, Te Ao Māori and Te Reo Māori, alongside the practicum courses and courses focused on the early years teacher and relational worlds of children. So we really give you a range of subjects to prepare you for working in the sector. So I'll pass on to my colleague now, Esther Fitzpatrick, to talk about the primary grad dip.
Kia ora, everybody. Thank you, Tamar. Right, great to have you with us on this drizzly Auckland day. Hopefully you're somewhere sunny. I'm the Director of the Graduate Diploma in Teaching Primary, and this is my first year here. We've had a very exciting year so far. As you can see, we teach a diverse range of ages and a diverse range of contexts with in a whole lot of different communities. I'm really excited that we've got hopefully potential students from Northland and Auckland zooming in with us today. There's a range of literacy, arts, drama, and physical education and science, social sciences, maths and technology that we focus on in the degree. We're very, very strong on linking the content with the actual pedagogy of teaching, the practice of teaching, and the content and the critical thinking. That's all I have to say today, and you're most welcome to contact me with any questions you have. Cheers. Handing over to Dr. Barbara Ormond.
Thank you very much, Esther. So I'm the Director of the Secondary Program, and as you see on the slide, it does have a focus of years 13 to 18, or at least those years old, which is in the school curriculum years 9 to 13. So you'll be teaching both at junior and senior levels in a secondary school, and of course each level has its own needs and challenges. The course begins on the 1st of February and ends early in November. So you'll be ready to take up a teaching position at the start of the following year. It's also an intensive program. Over the 1 year, we prepare you to teach your subjects effectively and to manage classrooms and to understand what it is to be a professional teacher. You've got 16 weeks in schools. That's in mainly 2 blocks of time in 2 different schools. Initially, you go out to observe teachers and see how they teach and see how schools operate. And then in your practicum schools, you'll be designing lessons, teaching classes to gain the practice that you need. You'll find that you actually quickly improve your skills and gain confidence to be able to teach teenagers. And by the time you leave this course, you'll be ready to go it alone and be a teacher for your own classes. Now, on the online program, as Sophie mentioned, there are a range of subjects you can teach, and they fit into 2 courses in our program, 2 curriculum courses, a main subject of 45 points and a second subject of 15 points. Sometimes these will be the same subject. So if you do maths, you'll probably be taking both courses in maths, both the main one and the second one. Your lecturers are specialists in teaching these subjects. They've been teachers in schools and they can share their knowledge of how best to teach the subjects. They're also very up to date, which you have to be in secondary because things change And as you probably know, there's new curriculum and NCEA things going on at the moment. You'll also bring your innovative ideas to teaching, because teaching is actually an endlessly creative occupation. The next slide, please, Sophie. Thank you. So what can you expect during the program? You'll learn how to teach and what to teach, what's in the curriculum. You'll learn how adolescents think about things. You'll look at it as a profession, how schools function, what it means to be a professional teacher, and the role education and teachers play in societies. You can also expect enjoyment, because learning to teach is such a lively collaborative adventure. It's just exciting, and no day is the same as the next, so you're never bored. The next slide, thank you. So for this teacher education in schools program, which is new for next year, this is a real opportunity to join a school community for the whole year. You'll be hosted by a school, and you'll see which schools are available on the following slide in a moment. So there are 7 participating schools in the South and East Auckland region. You'll be in schools for 4 days a week and have a day each week to work on your online learning, because you'll be doing your courses online. You won't have to pay fees for the program, plus there's a $10,000 scholarship for those who get into this program. And again, the subjects are limited to those online ones, the science, biology, maths, English, etc. Te reo. So applicants for this program have to have a confirmed offer in the secondary program to be eligible to apply. And you'd need to be resident in Auckland and qualified to teach those available subjects. Thank you very much. I'll hand now over to, there's the schools. I'll hand now over to Tom Clark, who's a current student in our program. And he can tell you all about it.
Kia ora tātou, ko Tom Clark toko ingoa. Lovely to see you all, but not see any of you actually. My name's Tom. I am currently in the secondary school grad dip program. I just finished today, basically. I had my last class, so I can reflect accurately on how the year has been. Basically, I chose the grad dip program. I used to work in the arts quite a lot, and I wanted to do something that was more connected to the community that I came from. And I was very lucky that lots of my arts training meant that I had this gorgeous skill set that I could use and repurpose inside teaching, which is why I then moved across to do a teaching course. And the diploma worked for me because I already had a degree in performing art I could use. So the diploma was sort of like a little top up to help me get the skills that I needed and sort of the experience that I wanted to be able to go into schools. I chose University of Auckland after the pandemic hit. I lost a lot of my work, and that sort of expedited my process into teaching. Because University of Auckland was the university in my city, the biggest one up here, and I also really liked the way that the course worked for me. So they obviously worked across a calendar year, which was taste delicious. And I also love the mix of theory that we got along with practical experience. I think one of the things that I really enjoyed over the duration of the course was all of the different strands of knowledge that we learned about teaching practice, about, like, we did this great course on child psychology, the psychology of teenagers, that I thought was so interesting. There's a critical thinking course that I did, which was about the relationship between education and society. And it felt like it was designed from so many different angles to try and challenge and my thinking around what education was and how I would implement my practice as a new teacher going into the classroom. One of my favorite courses that I did, I will be teaching English and drama next year, and my English course that I took as part of the University of Auckland was so phenomenal, and we learned so many exceptional practical, useful, concrete tools that we could bring into the classroom. And I meant to say, one of my favorite things about the course was the fact that all of the assignments sort of link, and I know assignments, whatever, but they link one to the next. And it sort of helped concretize the learning that I was making and felt like generous stepping stones to having things that I could do when I went to the classroom and when I then went on practicum. So the way my course was structured, we had 2 separate practicums, one across 8 weeks and one across 7 at different parts of the year, and interspersed between them were times when we were face-to-face, or if we were locked down at university, doing assignments in our classes, learning new things, and also reflecting on our experiences in practicum. It was so useful. I went to 2 separate schools. I went to one high DSL school and one low DSL school. And the purpose of the practicums, from what I understand, is to try give you a range of experience of how different schools operated. Next year, I'm going to be teaching at the school that I had my very first practicum on, which is awesome. It's a gorgeous way to like figure out, as someone who hadn't been back to a high school in like 10 years, to figure out the way that high schools work, to find out who I was in front of a classroom, and then also have this very structured guided time where I learned about pedagogy and teaching and being face-to-face with students, while also having someone, an assistant teacher from the school, to watch my classroom and be able to go, that was great, that was, you can need more work here, and give me sort of actual advice and help guide my journey. Yeah, so that's sort of, in a very small nutshell, my experience on practicum. It was lovely to speak to you. I'm going to hand over to whoever is next.
Thanks so much for that, Tom. That was great to hear. Okay, so we're just going to go into now the next steps if you do decide that you want to apply for the program. So the next steps in applying, the basic entry requirements for the program are to have a bachelor's degree either from New Zealand or overseas. You'll need a GPA of 2.4 or higher, and for the secondary program only, you'll need applicable teaching subjects. If you're not sure whether your degree has applicable teaching subjects, do get in touch with us and make an application anyway. The further entry requirements, so once you have applied online for the program, you'll also need to supply us with 2 referee reports. You'll need to complete a literacy and a numeracy assessment, and we'll get in touch with you about those after you've applied. You'll need to attend an interview, which normally we would do in-person and Zoom interviews. At the moment, obviously, we're just doing Zoom interviews. You will need to submit verified copies of documents if need be. If you've already studied with us, you probably won't need to submit anything. We will need to do a police check that's required for working with children. And if required, you may need to complete an IELTS requirement. That is something that we will assess when you apply for the program. It's quite difficult to say without seeing an application in whole whether you will need IELTS or not. So we'll make that assessment when you apply for the program. To actually apply for the program, you go to the main University of Auckland website, click on the study, and then apply now, which are highlighted in those red circles there. The initial application process is all done online. So once you have made your online application, you're then going to receive and accept your conditional offer, and that's going to have those conditions that we mentioned before, like the referee reports, literacy and numeracy assessments, interview and IELTS requirements. And I'll just stop there as well and just explain IELTS a little bit. So that is an English language test that might be a requirement if you haven't studied in an English speaking country. So if you've done your study in a country where English is not the official language, you may need to do this English test. And again, that's something that we'll assess when you do apply for the program. Once you've completed all of the conditions on your offer, returned all the forms to us, we've dotted the I's across the T's, so to speak, you'll get a firm offer for the program and you can then enroll in all your courses. Now, we do also have these really great Teach NZ scholarships that are now open, and you'll need to apply for those by the 15th of November 2021. Now, Teach NZ Career Changer scholarships, these could support you in your teaching journey by both covering your fees and paying you an allowance while you study. Definitely worth looking into and applying for. So I would recommend just having a look at that link there. So we've now got quite a bit of time for question and answer, which is great. So we'll just jump into the first question, which is how do we find practicum? So I'll let any of the program leader, we've touched on this a little bit, but I'll let any of the program leaders start with that one if they'd like.
So for secondary anyway, and I think it's the same for the others, but they can clarify that, we find you schools. So we have a practicum team who arrange your placement in different schools. So they take into account where you're living and so on, and the fact that you need 2 different types of school, and they find placements for you. So you don't have to do the work of asking schools for your placements.
Right, I'll just quickly jump in to say for the online grad dip teaching primary, there are placements in Northland and in Auckland areas, but not elsewhere. So you could be located outside of Auckland or Northland, but you would need to do the practicum. There are 3 of them within either Auckland or Northland.
And that's the same process with early childhood education, in that the practicum office will place students as close as we can to where you've indicated you would like to go for practicum.
That's great, thank you. So for the teacher education program, is this only open to the online programs? Barbara?
Yes, it is, because you need to be in schools 4 days, so you can't be in a face-to-face program because it's running during the time that you're actually in schools. So you're doing your online courses, and the same lecturers are teaching those as teach the face-to-face, but it is the online that you will be doing if you're doing the teacher education in schools program.
That's great, thank you. So we have someone who is keen to do early childhood and do it online. They've been working in the early childhood sector since 2016 and done certificate courses in Papareo and Tikanga. Now, what are the requirements for further study? Do they need further English requirements? I'll start off with the English requirements. Again, it's quite difficult to assess without seeing the whole application in front of us, whether you will need additional English tests or not. So I would recommend that you do apply for the program, and we will be able, or get in touch with us, and we'll be able to let you know then exactly whether you will need any English tests or not, because it is going to depend on your prior study as well. Tamar, did you have anything to add to that with the qualification?
Sure. So, I mean, they need to do a literacy, that's part of a test as part of applying for the program. And once you're accepted onto the program, at the very start of the year, all students are asked to complete a language diagnosis test called DELNA. And based on that, we provide students who need additional support with academic English. So you'd really need to be accepted onto the program and to do that DELNA test for us to answer whether you would need to further your English for that.
Great, thank you. This might be a question for Esther. Do online students have some sort of benchmarks or targets that need to be met on a regular basis? This is for grad dip primary.
Yes, they will do. There'll normally be weekly tasks that they have to be engaged in, either independent or collaborative, or both. Thanks.
Great,
Good
thank
question.
you. Okay, so to confirm, there are no course fees next year if we are offered the program, and upon that we can apply for the $10,000 scholarship. I'm not sure if this is related to the teacher education program, or if it's just generally for the program, if you're just normally applying for the program, studying it, and you're not getting one of those Teach NZ scholarships or any other kind of scholarship, then yes, you will need to pay normal either domestic or international fees, depending on what kind of student you're classed as. Yeah, Barbara, did you have anything to add to that if we were talking about the teacher program?
There will be limited places available for the teacher in education program. We have 7 schools and we don't have endless scholarships. So it is a very limited number available. So in most cases, you will be doing the usual things at university of paying fees. So that's the way it works. And the scholarship and fees only applies to the teacher in education program, not any other program.
Thank you. If you complete the primary school program and you later decide that you want to teach in high school, what would that pathway look like, or vice versa, secondary teaching to primary? So I'll let perhaps Barbara go first here.
There are a number of primary trained teachers that teach in secondary if they have a degree in a subject that is suitable for teaching, or they help out, or not help out, they often lead some of the student services sort of areas in schools for those students who are struggling a bit. There isn't the pathway back the other way. So if you're trained as a secondary teacher, you're not normally suitable for going back into the primary school because it's different skills are required. So that's generally been the pattern of how it's worked. There are some primary teachers who have gone into the secondary sector.
Great, thank you. We've now got a question for Tom about how the practicums get chosen for secondary. Well, I'll let Tom start.
Sure. What was the question? How they get chosen for secondary?
Yes, how do you choose your practicums?
Basically, the way that I understand it works is that there's an amazing team that works as part of the faculty, and the practicum experience on the course takes part under one of the particular papers that you do. And so there's a whole office that deals with that process, and the people in that office email out to a bunch of different schools. And as I understand it, they ask for how, like, where you live, if you have access to a car, and like any other circumstances that might be important to considering the how you would get to practicum. And then they match you up with schools that either best fit that or best fit the experience that you've just had before on the other practicum. I hope that makes sense.
That was great, thank you. We do have a question here about whether you can switch between the online and the on-campus study options. The basic answer to that is, if you're at the point before you've started the program, so say before December, when you're still going through the process of applying, and you decide that maybe you might be eligible for a scholarship for the online program, or you have a good reason for wanting to change from online to face, get in touch with us and we will be able to swap you over then. Once you have started the program, you can't mix and match between online and face-to-face. So if you're doing the online program, once you start in that program, you are expected to continue in the online medium. So there isn't the option to sort of duck in for a couple of weeks and then do online for a little bit like that. Yeah, did the program leaders have anything that they wanted to add to that?
I think that was a really clear answer, Sophie. So I think the answer is no.
Yep. Great, thank you. Tamar, for the early childhood practicum, there are 3 settings. So how are those allocated? Is it like the secondary program where it's 4 days in centre and 1 day to study? If they're doing online study from Northland but outside of Auckland? And when we finish the program, how do we get our registration?
Okay, so lots of different questions in there. When you go out on practicum as part of the ECE graduate, you go out full time. So you would go out for 17 weeks, and during those 17 weeks, you basically are working full time in a centre. So it's different to what Barbara was talking about with the 4 days in a school and 1 day of study. At the 3 different settings, we generally send you, one of those settings will be to a kindergarten, one of them will be to an infants and toddlers placement, and the other will be to an all-day care setting with over 2s. And the practicum office finds those centres for you based on the information you provide us. Like Tom was saying before, you're asked to complete a form that gives us information to work with, including where you live. So obviously, if you're in Northland, then we will be sending you to practicum centres in Northland. You wouldn't be required to come to Auckland for practicum. When you finish the program, you're then eligible to apply to the Teaching Council for a practicing certificate. And once you're working in an early childhood centre or a school, then you start working towards your full teacher registration. Initially, your practicing certificate will be provisional, and you'll need to work for at least 2 years as part of a mentoring program in order to work towards your full teacher registration. So I think I've covered all the questions that were asked there, Sophie.
Yes, you have very well, thank you.
I might just duck in there and clarify something about the 4 days in the week. So in actual fact, it's 4 days in the week in school. This is for the teacher education program, teacher in schools program, 4 days a week. But when practicum's on in those 2 blocks, you are actually there for the whole 5 days. It is treated as a practicum in the usual way to meet the Teaching Council requirements, etc. So that's just one slight difference there. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying.
Sorry,
that.
Sophie, was that question to all 3 of us? Sorry.
It was about early childhood, I believe.
I'll leave it. Thanks.
Yeah, for early childhood practicum. This one might be for all 3 of you though. What are the expected time commitments for the online course?
Shall I go first? It's basically full time for each course that you're studying. It's at least 10 hours of study per week. So it is an intensive course, and we really encourage students to plan to expect to be studying full time.
Yeah, thanks, Tamar. I think the exciting thing about the online option is that we recognise people's lives are, quite diverse and their needs, and so it's about an asynchronous delivery of a program that you can organise your time around, depending on whether you have caring requirements and other such activities. So, yeah, I think that's its most sort of biggest plus, really.
Thank you. I think you've answered that really well. So we have a question about somebody who might have applied and was successful last year but didn't actually proceed to do the course. Do they have to fully go through the entire application process again, or can their original approval support their readmission? Again, this is a very case-by-case sort of question. So I would recommend that you do just flick us an email at education@auckland.ac.nz, and we can have a look at your previous application and let you know. Again, it's really dependent on a number of factors. So I would recommend that if you are in that position, you just get in touch with us. Yeah, did anyone want to add anything to that? Or?
No, I think you're totally right, Sophie. A lot of these questions, really, if you're not happy with the answers, please do get in touch with us if you need a more elaborate answer, because your needs might be different to others.
Thank you. How do we know whether our degree majors fit within the applicable subjects when wanting to teach the secondary diploma? Barbara, are you able to answer this one?
Yes, certainly. So generally what you require is stage 3 in your main subject. There are some exceptions. It depends. Sometimes there are subjects that are similar and similar enough to enable you to teach a particular subject. But in general, that's the rule. And you may have a second subject that may only have stage 2, but again, what actually happens is that when you put in an application, we look at your transcript, and it's the subject specialists in their different areas that check every transcript and say, yes, suitable, no, they'd need an extra paper here, or whatever it is. So we check them all very carefully. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Barbara. We have a question here about whether placements can be in kura kaupapa Māori or just in mainstream schools.
That's a really good question. We do have what we call immersion Māori classes that some of our primary students go into. So those are available. I think that's a good question that we could explore further. Mm. So thanks for the question. If you're wanting us to investigate that further, can you let us know, please? And we'll get in contact with our Māori school, Te Puna.
Yeah.
I think for secondary, yes, you can, provided there is a school that provides the subjects and the support that is needed to make it equivalent to everything else, which I can't see why it wouldn't be.
Great, thank you. For the online option, is this available as a part-time option for graduate diplomas, i.e. completing in 2 years if you're working, so practicum is divided into 2 years rather than 1? I think that's just for generally for all the graduate diplomas.
I think they'll be different. So yes, for primary does have an online part-time option, but they need to contact the director, the program director first. So, Tamar, what's your?
The intention is that the graduate ECE is a full-time 1-year program. If someone started the program and they found, due to exceptional circumstances, they found they couldn't study full-time anymore, then we would look to make an exemption for them to be able to complete the program part-time. But initially it is intended to be a full-time program that spans over 1 year.
In secondary, we can accommodate part-time, and generally you do half in each year. It can't be extended beyond the 2 years because the Teaching Council require you to do it within 2 years. It does mean it's a little bit more tricky to manage because our papers are full year. You'd have to do all your or a lot of your theoretical and curriculum subjects in the first year, and you'd have to do the ones that link to practicum in the second year. So you wouldn't be going out in schools at all in the first year, and you can imagine that's just slightly difficult because you're not seeing how things are operating in schools while you're doing those other papers. That's why we recommend it to be the 1 year and not part-time, but that doesn't always suit people. So we have 2 or 3 people each year that end up doing it part-time.
That's great, thank you guys. Are the online classes at set times? I think anyone could take that if they want.
No, they're asynchronous. They aren't classes as such. You are presented with materials each week and you'll be working your way through those. There'll be connection points with the lecturer, no doubt, but not specific lectures or tutorials or any of those things.
Great, thank you. We have a question about overseas degrees here. So where do your overseas degrees get assessed? When you make your application to the University of Auckland, our admissions department will assess your overseas degree in the first instance. However, my understanding is that you will need to have an NZQA assessment in order to register as a teacher. So at some point you will need to apply and get that NZQA assessment done of your overseas qualifications. What if I've given IELTS 4 years earlier and the results are not applicable now? Unfortunately, yes, the IELTS validity is 2 years. So if you have done it more than 2 years ago, you will need to resit one of those English tests. And we did have a question earlier about whether PTE can be used. Yes, it can. We have a range of approved English tests, so I would recommend having a look on those program pages on the website, because they've got a link to the list of approved English tests. We've got a question from somebody who's got a Bachelor of Physical Education. Can they do the online grad dip for secondary school? Barbara, are you able to take this?
No, we don't have that available for 2022. We are looking to expand the range of subjects in the following years, but not for next year.
Perfect, thank you. Tom, this is a question for you. Is teaching a good career choice?
Yes, I hope. I'm very excited about it. My work has primarily been contractual, so for the last sort of 8 years of my life, I've gone from gig to gig, and I know that teaching is not always super set in concrete, but this is a more sustainable career choice for me. But that aside, I am sincerely looking forward to working with the students. That's been my favorite part of teaching so far. That's what I wanted to say. Teaching is a good career choice because one of the things I loved about acting and performance is that it's a concrete skill that you can learn, and you can develop that skill and you can get better at that skill over time. And I think that teaching is just the same. It's something that you can deepen your craft in. And I think that's a really important thing, because when you think about a career, you want to think about moving up and developing and getting better at something. And I feel that teaching is something that you can add more techniques to your tool belt. You can learn different ways to do it. There's so much research that's being done on the way that students are in classrooms and how schools are run. So there's always more information that you can add and refine your craft in. So that makes me excited when I'm thinking about my career path, because I know it's something that I'm going to keep on being able to build upon. So in that respect, yes. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, that was a lovely answer, thank you. So slightly related to that, but after hearing that, I'm sure this won't be the case. What if I discover teaching is not for me? Are there other careers in the education sector that I could use the grad dip for? So I might let any of the program leaders take this one.
I loved your answer, Tom, to finding a career in teaching, and I do agree, Sophie. It's vice versa. I know many fabulous people out there in the community who have got teaching degrees doing great things, not in teaching, but that they use it, informs what they're doing next. Tamar, did you have something to add to that in the early childhood sector?
Gosh, I mean, teaching gives you really broad skills to work with people. So I know that teachers work well in other areas too. It's great for traveling ECE. I mean, if you wanted to do something like get into nannying or sort of home-based childcare services, those are other options in addition to teaching in early childhood centres or kindergartens. But yeah, great crossover skills into other sectors.
Actually, I'd say the same. A lot of our primary school teachers go off and find jobs overseas as well. Probably the same with secondary, is it, Barbara? Yeah. And I'll just quickly answer another question that's sort of related to this. A lot of our students in primary have got their jobs for next year already from the diploma. So we don't help you to get your jobs. Often they are in relation to the schools that you've had your practicums in.
That's the same in ECE. so many of our students end up in teaching roles as a result of their practicum experiences, and I know a lot of our students have been offered teaching positions already, and they're sort of waiting for the students to finish their studies so that they can teach full time.
Thank you. That's a great answer. We've got a question here about the application process. When submitting the application forms, are digital signatures okay? I don't have a scanner or printer to physically handle the appropriate forms, and lockdown has made public facilities hard to access. Completely understand. Lockdown has made processing physical documents a nightmare. Yes, the short answer is you can use a digital signature. If you don't have a digital signature, you can also get creative. So I've seen people who have got a paper and pen and written their signature, taken a photo of it, and then put that photo on the form of their signature. So yes, we completely understand it. It is a really difficult time to do things like sign forms and send them in and scan them at the moment. So digital signatures are okay. Photos of signatures are okay. For the online graduate diploma in ECE, how many hours are required to study if you're currently working in ECE as well?
Well, basically, as I said before, it's full-time study. It is flexible, as Esther said, in terms of when you choose to study, so you can fit that around your work. But I think you would be very stretched if you were trying to work full-time and study full-time. So you'd need to think about your commitments various commitments that you have, and how superhuman you are, I think. But, you know, having that, being out actually working in a centre already would certainly be advantageous in terms of the experience that you have and being able to connect with the course content.
Brilliant, thank you. Barbara, this will be a question for you for secondary. Will the face-to-face course be conducted the same as the online course during a lockdown? What are the main pros and cons of choosing the face-to-face versus the online program?
Okay, well, I'll start with the pros and cons first. There's the advantages, I think, of a face-to-face program is getting to know your peers. So you've got a whole group, you might have, 20 others doing the same subject as you in your class, able to share ideas, able to give you their resources that they produce. There's a huge amount of collaboration and huge friendships build up in a face-to-face situation. And there are times when you can do very much more practical sort of things in a face-to-face situation. But we're trying, we're not trying, we're going to, in the online, make it as much as we can a similar experience to face-to-face, but it can't be identical, clearly. Now, I've forgotten the second question, part of that question. What was it, Sophie?
Sorry, let me just...
I've just lost it.
Again here. Just lost it too. Oh.
Sorry about that. So yes, while you're finding it, I'll just quickly answer another question that someone's had. You can engage with the online program anywhere in New Zealand. That's absolutely fine. It's asynchronous, it's online, but you need to be available to do the practicums in Auckland or Northland. So that's the catch point with this. So everything, all the teaching of courses is online and asynchronous, but the practicums are in either Auckland or Northland, and you have to be there full time for that period of time.
Thank you. Okay, I've just found the question again. So the other part of that question was, will the face-to-face course be conducted the same as the online during a lockdown?
Oh, during a lockdown, that's right. Okay. I think they will be different, because in a face-to-face program, when we suddenly go into lockdown, we flexibly adjust what lectures we do to match the fact that we're online, whereas the program is set fully for the year on the online program and can just proceed without interruption in the online program. So I think that's a difference. Teachers on this program do have to quickly switch around if we suddenly go into lockdown on a face-to-face situation, and that won't be the case for the online.
Great, thank you. We have a question here as well about overseas police checks, whether a hard copy is required. What is the deadline? Is it the same as the general application deadline? The short answer for this is do try your best to get your overseas police check to us before the program starts. It will be one of the conditions on your offer. However, again, at the moment, COVID has sort of changed the situation a little bit. So we are aware that there are some countries where you might struggle to get that overseas police check. If that is the case, please do get in touch with us, and there may be things that we can do in order for you not to have to worry about that. You will still need to get an overseas police check at some point, but if you are struggling to get one from a certain country, do get in touch with us. So I hope that helps there. We've got a similar question about the advantages of doing the face-to-face program versus the online program for primary. Esther, did you want to take that?
Well, it's the similar answer to what Barbara was saying, really, for any of these graduate diplomas. The benefit of online is that you choose when you engage, so they will all be asynchronous, so you sort it out with your timetable, and so, but you know, this is in response to a need in our communities for more flexible designing of tertiary programs. But you do miss out on those relationship building moments, which are critical for teaching regardless. And so we are working very hard, especially in the lockdown, has taught us a heck of a lot. And one of the key things that we have to work hard to do is to look at the ways that we can develop collaborative moments in those online teaching spaces, and also ways for our students to engage with each other, to engage with their lecturers, and also to engage with the students in the classrooms that they're teaching. So that's a big learning point for us that we're quite excited about. I know that's not probably the answer you're looking for, but really, again, I think it comes down to what is going to work best for you. We've got a student here, Sophie, he's been trying to get this question answered. She put it in our chat before. Can students temporarily withdraw from the course and re-enroll? You could probably answer that one best. There are some ways that we address that, isn't it? But again, it's on an individual basis.
Yeah, so in terms of, you know, if something happens essentially on the program, I would always say that the most important thing is that you do get in touch with us as soon as possible. We completely understand that, you know, things happen in people's lives and we can't always control them. So if you do have something unexpected, exceptional that goes on and you do need some time off from the program, perhaps you need to withdraw from the program and come back into it in the following year, get in touch with us in the Student Centre. If something happens, the most important thing is that you do just get in touch with us as soon as possible. And yes, there are things that we can do depending on, you know, what time it is in the year, but we will always do whatever we can to support you if that is the case.
Tom, they've asked if you'd answer another question. There's one there for you about, did you do any teaching online during COVID lockdown and what was it like?
I just typed out an answer for that, but I'm happy to talk about it live. I absolutely did. 3 weeks into my second practicum, towards the end of the year, we went into this current lockdown that we're in, and the school that I was on switched into online learning. I was like quite nervous about it at first, and like definitely the students were a bit spooked about going into lockdown. I think one of the big things I learned on the course is that the students always brought their home lives with them, and so some who didn't have home lives that were like conducive to being in study situations had a harder time. And the style of teaching that I did also changed definitely. But I think one of the benefits about doing the course next year is that with all of these lockdowns, schools are starting to develop these like very creative and robust systems about how they deal with teaching inside lockdowns. I know that the teachers that I was with were learning new ways to get students to collaborate with each other, which is one of the massive challenges about being on an online environment, is that students often, the learning sort of becomes more like lecture style, which doesn't always suit everyone. So the school that I was at was learning new methods about how to get students to work with each other and figure out ways to actually collaborate on things while using the technology that they had. I loved it. In the end, I had a great time. And I was really grateful because also I learned a lot about how digital technology and like computers and different programs on the internet, different ways of linking up, I could use them in a face-to-face classroom as much as I could as an online classroom. Yeah, I think it's hard, and it's something that you have to adjust to. But I think when we were at about week 6, after 3 weeks of being in lockdown, the school that I was at had hit a really good rhythm, and the students started engaging in a really like beneficial way for me as well for them. That's my answer.
That's a great answer. Thank you, Tom. Okay, we'll just do 2 final questions and then I think we need to wrap up.
Sophie, we've had a few about the vaccinations and what we expect. I think we should give an answer for that, because that's a big question in everyone's minds. John, yeah. While you get another question, just please keep an eye on the ministry guidelines and what's happening and expected in our schooling sectors. That's what I would say from the primary. That's what we're asking our students to do. And so these are diplomas in education, and we abide by the ministry guidelines. So keep an eye on what the ministry is saying, and for the university also has quite clear guidelines. Barbara, would you have anything to add to that around vaccinations?
I think that it's pretty clear that people are going to need to be fully vaccinated to be able to go in schools on these teacher programs next year.
Great, thank you. I think that's almost all the time that we've got, so we will just wrap up there. There was a question about how do I get in touch if I've got further questions after this. So here we go, this is the slide here. If you'd like to follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram to keep up with the latest news and events, please do. If you've got specific questions that didn't get answered tonight that you do want to get in touch with us about, our email address is down the bottom there, education@auckland.ac.nz. And lastly, I'd just like to thank you all so much for taking the time to join us tonight. It's been a pleasure to have this webinar. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.